Welcome to the Silhouettes of Success podcast with your host, successful entrepreneur, broker, and business mentor, Amber Weitzer. Because success comes in all shapes, sizes, and styles, the Silhouettes of Success podcast is shining the light on industrious women with a collection of curated conversations of intentional inspiration designed to inspire your heart, ignite your mind, feed your soul, and gift you with actionable insights directly from inspirational, everyday women who've shown tenacity, grit, and grace, having taken on the challenges in their lives and business and won. Remarkable, down-to-earth, and relatable, Amber and her guests will share with you uplifting and extraordinary real-life success stories, motivational ideas that just might help spark something within you. With the deepest desire to serve you, help you grow so you can begin to shine the light that will illuminate your very own silhouette of success. So, let's get to it.
Hello and welcome to the Amber Weitzer podcast, Silhouettes of Success. Our VIP featured guest is a Chief Executive Officer of Energy Funders, the world's first online marketplace for direct investment into off-market oil and gas deals. She previously served as a CEO and lead geologist of Century Natural Resources. She founded Century in October of 2018 with $75 million in private equity sponsorship. In her role as CEO, she guided the company's development and management of approximately 150,000 acres in the Powder River Basin. She is a geologist by training, earning her master's in geology from the University of Texas at Austin and her bachelor's in geology from the University of Colorado. As a female leader in a male-dominated industry, she is passionate about mentoring and recruiting more young women into the industry, and we'll let her dive into that. Silhouettes, welcome Laura Pommer to the show. Hello, Laura.
Good morning. How are you today, Amber?
I am fantastic. Thank you once again for joining us. We are so thrilled to have you and hear about what's going on in your world and your silhouette of success.
Awesome. Sounds good. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Fantastic. So I like to kick it off with allowing the guest, which is you, VIP featured guest today, to illustrate or help illustrate the background of your journey. So talk to us a little bit about that.
How far back do we go? So I am originally from Boulder. I know it's tough. I'm originally from Boulder, Colorado. I grew up in a family. I had my grandfather was a doctor and my grandmother was a nurse. However, we grew up spending a lot of time outside, obviously living in Boulder. And so when I got to college, I had always wanted to be a doctor, inspired, of course, by my grandfather. I started taking my pre-med classes, and I was suggested to add geology classes to my kind of programming from my uncle, who is a geologist as well. So I added some geology classes, ended up loving it. Pre-med was great, but pre-med students are kind of cutthroat, and that's just not my vibe. So I continued forward with both degrees, but ended up going into geology because my uncle, of course, got me an internship. And so that kind of kicked off the I'm going to be a geologist thing. So I did that for a while. I started at a company in Denver after I graduated college, which was a good experience. However, of course, with oil and gas, there's a lot of upturns and downturns. And I started in an upturn and I guess technically ended in a downturn. We went from having 21 drilling rigs in the Piceance Basin to about 4 in a period of 2 months right after I had started. And of course, as a young geologist, I was kind of lost in the shuffle. So I decided that I should probably go back to school. I worked there for a couple years and then decided I would go back and get my master's degree. So I don't know what I was thinking. I chose Texas because the two options were Colorado School of Mines and Texas. And I was traveling when I decided. I'd never been to Texas before. And I thought, you know what, if I want to be a petroleum geologist, which is of course what my training is in, I want to go to Texas because that's the best program in the country for it. So I ended up showing up in Austin, and it was a lot hotter than I expected, which is hilarious looking back. Like, what was I thinking? And started my degree there. Great program. My brother actually ended up going to UT as well. My sister-in-law also. So all geologists, by the way. So we got a whole fam. And then I finished my degree at Austin and went to work for a major oil company called Anadarko, which has subsequently been purchased by Occidental out of Houston. So I worked at Anadarko for probably about 4 years. I worked everything from, operations, AKA drilling new wells, to onshore exploration, where I would find new pools of oil and gas and go drill for those. I ended up leaving because a private equity geology position had kind of presented itself to me, and the politics of Anadarko weren't working great for me at the time. I was doing really well with my work, but decided I wanted to try something where I got to test my ideas a little bit more quickly, if that makes sense. Like at a big company like that, you can come up with a prospect, a new area to go drill, and potentially never go drill it. So I wanted to kind of see the fruits of my labors as a scientist, right? So I went to a small private equity shop, a portfolio company of a private equity sponsor, big company called NCAP, sponsored a group called Plantation Petroleum. And I hopped on over there. I did that for about 5 or 6 months, which was interesting because I'd never worked conventionals before. And so the difference there is that what I'd been doing before was unconventional resource evaluation, which is drilling wells horizontally, more or less, in tighter rocks. So instead of drilling a hole straight into the earth, we drill a hole straight into the earth, and then we turn it sideways so that we can get maximum surface exposure to that rock because it doesn't flow as easily as the other rocks do. So this was my first time actually drilling vertical wells and seeing exposure to rocks with, well, I'm going to get technical here, but Darcy perm, which I had never seen before. So that was great. It was a good experience. One of the principals from that company decided to try and raise capital to then go do unconventionals, which I was more familiar with. And so he recruited me to come over. We raised together, I think it was about $500 million to go explore for unconventionals, try and find a deal. And we just had a really hard time finding a deal. It was a very busy time in the oil and gas industry, and there wasn't anything that was really a right fit for us. So I ended up leaving before they kind of shut that shop down. Kind of hung out for a while, did some teaching. I taught some geologists how to map and how to slip logs and things like that. And then ended up running into, my buddy from Anadarko from my previous role called and said that they had needed a geologist for a shop there. And I went and chatted with them. And meanwhile, I had mapped out a lot of different things in my experience in the previous company. And so I decided that I would go to that interview. I interviewed and basically said, I also have these other things that I've been looking at. And they said, oh, well, if you want to work it up, bring it back in, please do. So I did. I mapped everything. I tightened everything up. I found some economics. I had someone help me run economics on it, of course, because that's a reservoir engineer's traditional job. Now I could maybe figure out how to do it myself. I don't know. It'd still be difficult. But anyway, I went in and proposed this new area, and they ended up agreeing to give myself and the two people I started it with $75 million to go pursue the asset. So that, of course, was a huge coup for me personally. I mean, I was 32 and a geologist and a female and was the CEO of a brand new private equity sponsored portco. So really big deal, very exciting, really fun time, also super stressful. I always say that the few gray hairs that I do have came from that time because we were not only closing our deal with the private equity sponsor, we were also in the process of closing our deal with the asset owners. So it was a hairy couple of days. It was also my birthday and my best friend got engaged. So it was like a crazy week-long whirlwind. And then we were up and running and we didn't stop. And we just kept going. So we drilled one well, an exploratory well. That was a technical success, meaning we did find oil, which was good, obviously. The problem with it was very operationally difficult. And so the well ended up being more expensive than it was intended to be. And so it wouldn't pay out. And there's all these complicated things that have to do with both geology, engineering, and land. So anyway, to make a long story short, COVID hit and everything basically slid to a halt. And when Biden was elected, most of our acreage was federally controlled, and Biden changed his policy on what they were going to do with federally controlled oil and gas exploration, basically. And so I had to reevaluate my presence there and decide what I wanted to be doing. And, not drilling isn't really an option for me. I'm an explorationist, of course, and so I wanted to go be exploring. So I had been kind of soft recruited by the principals of energy funders for about a year before that. And at that point, decided that it was time for me to make a move. I was there, I guess it was a little bit longer than 2 years. So came over to energy funders, and it's been really interesting ever since. It's a very unique company. I think might be one of the only ones that's actually doing what we're doing at this point. Of course, there's always been oil and gas promoters out there who try and get wealthy people, high net worth individuals to invest in single well oil and gas deals. And that still exists. They sit in a phone slamming booth and they call and call and call. But there's a couple of things that are interesting about energy funders. Of course, you said we are the first platform to offer direct access to off-market oil and gas deals. We do some other deals as well. We've got some technology deals. Eventually, I'd like to get into some other things, but we were started by a couple of real estate attorneys who saw the success of online real estate platforms like Cadre and Realty Mogul, who give accredited individuals access to alternative investments. So in that case, real estate. These real estate attorneys were like, well, we should do that, but with something else. So they decided to start energy funders and do it with oil and gas. Now, they did a great job. They raised a bunch of capital, brilliant idea, set up the platform, got our technology up and running. However, if you're not in oil and gas and you're not technical, it's very difficult to have access to good deal flow. And it's just like any industry, you get a network and you figure out who everybody is and it turns into something, or if you're not in it, you could potentially crash and burn. So they drilled a lot of wells that were not successful. And so, of course, when you're trying to recruit investors, track record is one of the most important things. And so what we did when I came in was we rebuilt the team with only oil and gas professionals. It does just so happen that I think our entire team is female right now, which is sort of an interesting thing. Unintentional, but very cool, especially in oil and gas. It's something that sets us apart for sure. I will say I've never worked at a company where the communication was better. So I think that kind of is an interesting nugget we can talk about after this. But we have been evaluating deals. We raised our first fund with me as the CEO in 2021 and into early 2022, but that was a $15 million fundraise, which was a really big deal for us because the platform had prior to that only raised about $20 million total over 5 years. And the largest fund they had ever raised was about 1.7 million. So we almost 10x the raise, which was great. And we put that money to work immediately into a variety of different oil and gas wells. Of course, that's my specialty. That's where I kind of come in. Well, I don't come in, obviously. I'm here for everything, but I came in and helped everybody pick wells, get everything up and running. And that's been really fun. We've had some success with that fund, but a lot of that fund was buying into producing wells, so wells that are already online, which is nice because it diminishes the risk of drilling one well. It diminishes the risk of drilling, which there's a lot of risk associated with that. And then number two, it diminishes the risk when you invest in more than one well. So that was always the intent, was instead of drilling one well, highly risky prospects, we now raise funds to go drill or buy into multiple well prospects. So you're decreasing your concentration risk, which inherently, could put a dent in your returns, but more than likely with oil and gas, the chance of success of one vertical well is actually only about 30%. So you really want to be putting your money into a basket of wells instead of one well at a time. So we've been doing that since I came in 2021, and we're pivoting a little bit. And the past couple of years have been really interesting for me as a geologist, right? I'm a scientist. I'm now having to think about things like marketing and digital advertising, because the folks that we're raising capital from are just accredited investors, which means anybody who's making a certain amount of money can invest in an oil and gas project with us. So we have to figure out how to go find those people and convince them that our product is the best product out there. So that's been really interesting for me, and something that, frankly, I've somewhat struggled with because it's just not my background. But I think we're starting to figure it out. And I've got a wonderful team who are all very helpful in that regard. And we are starting to look around for kind of some sales and marketing experts to help us out. But yeah, that's kind of how I got to where I am. And sorry, that was kind of long, but I hope that's what you were looking for.
All what we're looking for.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Perfect.
it's
Great.
amazing. So I'm on a page and a half of notes.
Okay.
Love it. Because it's such a big and bold. When we see your title and when we see the industry that you're in, if you're
hmm
not a part of it, it's like, wow,
Right.
and so many things that you're saying,
Right.
completely you're talking with to our audience, whether you're looking for, supporting other women or looking for
hmm
other women to add to your team or the sales and mark. I mean, you're just talking to us. So this is fantastic. So I
Right.
hope everybody else has as many notes as I do. So let's break into this more about you. So I'm hearing so
Yeah.
much of what you've got going on, and you've got some transition over the last, recent couple of years. So the alarm clock goes off and your work business day begins. What's it look like for you? I'm hearing some structure. I'm hearing some analytical in there, but I'm also hearing the adventurous side of you that really likes, like you said, go
Mm.
explore and break free and do my own thing, kind of an entrepreneurial
Yeah.
tone, in there. So what's it look like for you? What's a day in the life?
And that's a pretty interesting question. I'm still trying to figure that out. Some days, some days I wish I could call another, female or not female CEO and of a company like mine, which there are not that many, and just say, "What do you do all day?" Because this is what I do, and I don't know if I'm right. Like, I'm just not sure if this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Of course, it is, but typically, so I actually just recently moved to San Antonio from Houston. I was living in Houston, of course, because that's kind of the hub of the oil and gas industry. And now that I've really built out my network there, I felt the freedom to head over to San Antonio, which for me was more of a lifestyle choice. It's not as big of a city. And of course, coming from a place where there's a lot of outdoors activities, I wanted to be somewhere else, even though it's still in Texas, that still has some outdoor activities. So I moved over here. And of course, that's also changed what my workday looked like. So I would say when I was in Houston, I'd wake up. Usually I'd try and exercise. I would probably sit down on my computer, respond to emails. I almost always call my partner, Ginny, who's our reservoir engineer and also our attorney. She and I catch up every morning pretty much and just make sure we're all on the same page. And then I'd call. I'm really big into, because we are a um, not an office company, and everybody lives kind of all over the place, actually, which is sort of interesting. I don't know if it's working necessarily, but for the time being, it'll work. Ginny lives in New York. My VP of Investor Relations, Elizabeth, lives in San Antonio also. So I would call Elizabeth after calling Ginny. I typically talk to our sponsor, our principal investors, once a day, maybe a couple times a day. There's two of them, and one of them is very helpful. He's very active in the business advisory side. So he and I would chat about what needed to be done, and then I would start to crank things out. Sometimes I'll leave the house, sometimes I'll stay at the house and just sort of get stuff done. Now, when I moved to San Antonio, it's a little bit different because our main principal does live here, one of them. And so he and I are actually able to get together for coffee most mornings and kind of get the day lined out. And then I come back to my apartment, I exercise, I try and get stuff done. We go and have meetings, and it's really very unstructured, which I'm actually trying to reintroduce a little more structure. But until I am settled, I think it's going to be hard to do that. So just trying to get settled in here in San Antonio. And once that happens, I'll be ready to rock and roll, add a little bit more structure in, and hopefully get us an apartment, or not an apartment, sorry, an office. An office.
Exciting. There's a lot of moving parts, but it keeps
Yeah.
that
Yes.
enthusiasm, right? Keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Thinking through some of these, maybe these moments in your days, and like you mentioned, wishing for the opportunity to reach out to a counterpart that's in the same industry, something like that. If
Mm-hmm.
and when you do get stuck, need motivation, or really to break through what seems like a barrier between you and a goal, or what best practices work for you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Usually when I feel like there's a barrier, I try to talk to my team. One of my team members she ran a tech company for a while. She's based in Denver. I've known them for quite some time. And oftentimes I'll call Holly and just sort of chat, or, Ginny and I will talk, or Elizabeth and I will talk. We try and psych each other up again. And then my kind of business advisor I mentioned, Paul, I'll usually call him and be like, okay, you've of course not done this before either, but when you encounter issues, what do you do? And we just try to reframe, right? Like, it's just taking it, turning it on its head and thinking, what can I do with this to make it different or better or change it or whatever? And then how do I get the resources to do so? Like, where do I dig up capital to go and find out how to do that? And recently we had to go through a pretty major downsizing. We're okay, this is sort of a complicated thing, but we charge a fee for our investors that's 2% of our assets under management, which is significantly lower than everybody else out there, which is great, except that it's not making enough money right now for us to really sustain the type of team I want us to sustain. So we had to go through some cuts. And of course, that was extremely difficult. I hate doing that. And, unfortunately, we had to right size the firm. So we are now right sized, in my opinion. And my duty is to try and figure out how to raise as much capital for these oil and gas projects as possible. So I'm trying to figure out how to balance the team that I need with the money that I have while trying to go raise more capital. So, there's a barrier every single day. And if you're not willing to turn it upside down and try and figure out how to get around it, it's just, it's very difficult to continue forward. I think I have a tendency to be pretty mentally flexible. And I think that makes me a lot more nimble. And I try to be really fast about decision making and not ruminate on things, which I think helps in that sense. And I think pivoting too, like if something's really bothering me, I find that if I take some time to think about something else, it helps me come back to that issue or barrier with a new look at it.
It's fantastic. I like how
Mm-hmm.
you said mentally flexible, and making the
Mm-hmm.
decision. I think sometimes we just
Right.
not making the decision is worse than any decision we could possibly make. And
Yep,
those are
totally.
hard lessons
I'm a
learned.
big forward progress person.
Yes, agree. Love that.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
Mm-hmm.
something that was noted in your bio, which clearly caught my attention, in addition to all
Mm-hmm.
the other amazingness, is you talked about aspirations for mentoring more women in your field. And I, like
Mm-hmm.
you pointed out, enjoy how your team is women mostly, for the most part, right now, and that great communication.
Mm-hmm.
Wink,
Mm-hmm.
wink.
Mm-hmm.
But where does the inspiration
Mm-hmm.
to do that, to mentor and to motivate and to bring more young women into the field? Where do you think that comes from?
That's an easy question. If you look at the makeup of any oil and gas company or all of them, the number of women who are in positions that I would want to see myself in is probably less than 1%. I've done a lot of research on this, and something that stands out is that it's hard to get people into those, like women specifically or people of color, into those positions without someone there as an example. Like you don't feel like you can aspire to something unless you see an example, right? And so I feel like I've sort of taken it upon myself to be that example, because obviously I've been surrounded by a certain type of person my entire career, and I didn't see anybody in a position that I could aspire to, and so I'm really trying to kind of pave my own way here, and I don't want other people to have to do that. I think it's time that we recognize that, and of course, it's some industries are improving faster than others, but it's time that we recognize that talent comes in a variety of packages, and those packages don't all look the same. And my sister-in-law, Rania, is also a geologist. She has her PhD from the Colorado School of Mines, and she works for a company called BPX in Denver. And she's kind of my like test case. Hey, can I mentor you? We haven't had a discrete discussion about it, but she does call and ask questions all the time and frames things for me where, she had this situation happen and what would I do and all of that. And I find it very frustrating that despite the fact that, I've been through all of those things and more, I will give her advice and it just doesn't really seem to matter. So I think that females have a tendency to, sometimes, this is maybe too much of a broad generalization, but there can be a tendency to try and cut each other down. I had a female boss when I was working at my first oil and gas job who was constantly trying to undermine me, and I found it very frustrating. And I'll never do that. Frank conversations need to happen if frank conversations need to happen, but you should be there to support each other and bring each other up, especially in an industry where, at Anadarko, I think it was the geologists were 20% female. That's not good. That's really bad, because the number of females who are graduating from, for example, the University of Texas, it's 60-40 female to male ratio coming out of UT Geosciences. So the fact that these oil companies are, representing a fraction of the high quality talent coming out of these schools it's just appalling to me. So that's why I'm motivated by that. I'd like to try and figure out a way wherein I can help more females, and other folks too. It's not just females. We have very poor representation across the board in oil and gas, and I have lots of friends who are Black, who really struggle. It's tough, and it's hard to find like an outlet for that. Like, I just don't really know how to mentor people. The one thing I have found is that now that I have been the CEO of 2 different companies, I do get a lot more people who reach out and ask questions, and I'm always happy to respond to those. So it's interesting, but yeah, that's the motivation. It's pretty obvious.
Especially seeing the stats. When you see the stats and then you're on a
Yes.
daily, you see it on a daily. Period. End of story.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I think there might be a part 2 in there for you, maybe in a couple of years when we revisit and you're saying and announcing your formalized program. I believe. So I'm going to put it back
Yeah, there
to
you
you.
go. I like it.
Milady, I'm looking at the clock and I want to squeeze a couple more questions in. Is that okay? Okay,
Yeah, of
we'll be
course.
quick about it. So, where do you turn to when you need inspiration? When you are just maybe, at the exhaustion, or is there a favorite resource or something that you do to uplift and inspire? We love to share resources here. So if something's working for you, whether it be a book, or do you have a favorite quote or anything like that you'd want to pass on with us? What works for you?
I don't know that I necessarily do have something like that. I kind of tend to, it's sort of a strange thing to say, but kind of float around. I find a lot of inspiration in nature, and with friends. And I did hear something the other day. Jane Fonda was on a podcast with Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and I was listening to it, and it was fabulous, of course. They did have some interesting things to say about oil and gas, which I don't necessarily agree with, but that's fine. And I can't remember who Jane Fonda said she heard this from, but no is a complete sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And that really resonated with me, because I think as well, maybe not even as females, but as a people pleaser, I'm a people pleaser. I never say no. And I think it's time for me to say no. And I don't have to say I'm sorry afterward. I can just say no. That's it. No is a full sentence. So that gives me some freedom. I need to start doing that, actually.
Well, we grant you permission to do do it. Go for it.
Yes.
Put up those
Thank you.
boundaries. Yes.
Thank
Good
you.
for you.
I know.
It is a journey sometimes
Mm-hmm.
to realize that we need to do that. Sometimes we have to hear
Oh,
it
yeah.
from somebody else. Be
Mm-hmm.
like, wait a minute. Yes, I can do that.
I
Good for
know.
you.
It's
You
crazy,
were
isn't
ready
it?
to hear it. That's why
Thank you. Well, we'll see if I can. We'll see
you
if I can actually
implement
do
it.
it.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
mercy. All right. So it has been fantastic visiting with you. I do have a female friend in the industry, and she was the first. And so this actually, and a client. Interesting. Now you're opening my eyes more to this. So I am totally energized by listening and hearing what you're doing and what you're going for. We've got a lot of, I know, accredited investors. We've
Great,
got a lot
thank
of
you.
great things. So I know that hopefully this is going to really inspire them as well. But I want to make sure I am keeping you on time here.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a piece of key go-to advice to share with the audience? Something that has resonated with you that you've carried through the years, whether it was something maybe going back to, you talked about, your uncle or your grandparents, anything that really sticks with you?
There is one that actually a male mentor of mine, an older geologist, when I was working at Anadarko, told me that, I was always very ambitious. And he told me, grow where you're planted. And I don't know that it's necessarily right, but I spend a lot of time thinking about that because I kind of almost disagree with it. Sometimes I agree with it and sometimes I disagree with it. But I think the point is, if you're in a situation and you're unhappy about it, you still need to move forward with you still have to move forward, right? So I consider my time in Houston, I knew I needed to live there for a certain amount of time and I ended up loving it, but I had to grow there, right? Like I had to grow into it. And then I think the counter to that is that sometimes you do grow out of things and you also need to be okay with making changes. So anyway, it's an interesting little saying. And again, I'm not sure if I totally agree with it, but it is something that I spend time thinking about. So I think it's helpful to kind of, if you're in a place and you can't necessarily change your being there, what can you do to improve your situation or make yourself feel better? And if you feel like you've outgrown it or changed enough that it's time to change, then you should probably do that as well. I think it's just like a forward movement thing. I'm a big proponent of always making changes and moving forward.
Words of wisdom.
Yes. Thank you, Amber.
Words of wisdom. Okay. All right, my lady, let's wrap this up in respecting these schedules, these busy schedules, phone calls to make, meetings to have.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Where can our audience go either to find and connect with you on your socials or support you in your continued success?
Awesome. Well, we are always available at energyfunders.com. I am personally available at my LinkedIn, which is Laura Pommer. And then, of course, Twitter. Energy Funders has a Twitter, and I have a personal Twitter, though I'm a little unsure about that these days. So those are my stats.
Excellent. And just a reminder to the audience, we always include that so you are a click away from connecting with Laura. Laura,
Awesome. Thank you very much, Amber. I really
No,
appreciate
thank
it.
you. You have been amazing. It has been just educational and exciting listening to all of the adventure and helping to promote other women. So thank you for what you're doing and enjoy the rest of your day.
Awesome. You as well.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Amber.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Silhouettes of Success podcast. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on all the new episodes. We are here for you and with you. We encourage you to share this podcast on all your socials and pass on the light to help illuminate another silhouette of success. To find out the latest ways to inspire your heart, ignite your mind, and gain actionable insights, subscribe at thesilhouettesofsuccess.com or connect with us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. We're grateful that you tuned in. Remember, you are exactly where you need to be, right here with us. This is the Amber Weitzer podcast, Silhouettes of Success.